He invited the maid's son to play chess just for fun, but within minutes the entire mansion fell silent. What happened next made a powerful millionaire realize that true genius and real greatness don't come from wealth but from the heart. Subscribe now to HOA Stories USA for more heart-touching stories that change how we see people in life. In a world where stories speak louder than words, this is Black Inside USA. Real emotions, real people, real change. The golden light of morning spilled through the tall windows of the Whitmore mansion, bouncing off the marble floors and glistening chandeliers. The air smelled faintly of expensive polish and roasted coffee, while servants moved quietly through the halls like whispers of wind. At the center of this world was Richard Whitmore, a man whose name alone could open doors anywhere in the country. He was a self-made millionaire, or at least, that's what everyone said. But behind his confident smile and polished shoes, Richard had started to forget what humble even meant. He believed life was a chessboard, people were pieces, and money was the strategy that always won. Every Sunday, Richard held a private brunch for his associates, men who discussed business over gold-plated coffee cups and bragged about their latest investments. They laughed loudly, never noticing the quiet people around them who served the food, cleaned the tables, and made sure their perfect lives stayed spotless. Among those quiet figures was Martha, the housemaid. She'd worked for Richard for nearly 10 years, honest, respectful, and invisible. Few guests even noticed her, except for when their napkins needed folding. But this Sunday, something was different. Martha's son, Elijah, waited in the servants' area. He was only 12, but he sat straight, his small hands resting on his knees, his eyes sharp with curiosity. Martha had brought him because her babysitter had fallen sick. She begged Richard to let him stay quietly in the corner while she worked. "Just for today, sir. He won't make a sound." Richard, distracted by his morning papers, waved his hand without looking up. "Fine, fine, just keep him out of sight." As the men gathered in the grand hall, their laughter filled the air. Richard's eyes landed on the boy sitting quietly near the doorway, his uniform neat but worn at the edges. "Who's that?" one of the guests asked with a smirk. "Oh, that's Martha's boy," Richard replied casually. "She didn't have anywhere to leave him today." The man chuckled. He looked serious, like he's about to negotiate a deal. Richard laughed. "Maybe I should put him to the test. Who knows, maybe he'll teach us something." The men laughed again, but one of them noticed the chessboard sitting on the side table, an antique set carved from ivory and ebony. "Richard," he said with a teasing tone, "why not let the boy play you a game? Let's see if the maid's son can handle the master of strategy himself." Richard grinned. "Why not? It'll be fun." Martha froze as she heard them. "Sir, please, he's just a child." "He doesn't." But before she could finish, Elijah stood. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "I can play." There was no fear in his eyes, only quiet confidence. The men exchanged amused glances as the millionaire and the maid's son took their seats at the chessboard. The room fell silent. "The game begins." Richard started strong. His moves were sharp, quick, and precise, just like in business. Every piece he touched was part of a plan, every move a show of control. Elijah watched carefully, his eyes following every motion, studying not just the board, but Richard's hands, his rhythm, his confidence. 5 minutes in, Richard leaned back. "You're thinking too long, son. Sometimes in life, hesitation costs you the game." Elijah smiled gently. "Sometimes it helps you see what others miss, sir." A quiet laugh rippled through the room. But then, Elijah made his move. Richard frowned. The boy had set a trap, a clever one. He dismissed it as luck. But 3 moves later, another trap appeared. Then another. Now, the laughter stopped. The businessmen leaned closer, watching as the powerful man of millions began to sweat. "Your move, sir," Elijah said calmly. Richard tried to regain control, his mind racing. But every path he took, Elijah had already seen it. 10, maybe 15 moves ahead. Within 20 minutes, the game had changed. The millionaire was on defense. The room had gone so silent you could hear the clock ticking. Elijah's hand hovered over his final piece. Then, softly, he said, "Checkmate." Richard froze. The men behind him stared in disbelief. The boy had beaten him, cleanly, brilliantly, without arrogance. Elijah simply folded his hands and whispered, "Thank you for the game, sir." Martha stood near the doorway, tears in her eyes, unsure whether to smile or apologize. She whispered, "Elijah," but Richard didn't respond. He just stared at the board, his mind echoing with the quiet realization that this child, this maid's son, had outplayed him not just in chess but in something far deeper. Finally, he looked up and said softly, "Who taught you to play?" "My mom," Elijah replied. "She couldn't afford lessons, so she brought old books from the library. We practiced every night after she came home from work." A lump rose in Richard's throat. He looked at Martha, tired, humble, yet proud. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was awakening, a shift in the heart. That night, long after everyone left, Richard sat alone in the grand hall. The chandelier lights shimmered, but the sparkle felt empty now. He stared at the chessboard again, the same one that once symbolized control. He remembered Elijah's calm eyes, the gentle smile, the quiet intelligence that came not from privilege but from perseverance. The next morning, Richard called Martha to his office. She entered nervously, hands clasped. "Sir, if it's about yesterday, I'm really—" Richard held up a hand. "Martha, please sit." She hesitated but obeyed. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Yesterday I acted poorly. I thought it would be amusing to play a child for entertainment. But your son taught me more in 30 minutes than most men do in a lifetime." Martha blinked, unsure what to say. "He's gifted," Richard continued, "and he deserves an opportunity." From that day, everything began to change. The opportunity: Richard arranged for Elijah to attend one of the best schools in the state, his tuition fully paid. He also found a mentor, a retired chess grandmaster, to guide him. Martha couldn't believe it. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." Richard smiled. "Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. Let him dream big." Months passed, and Elijah's name began to spread. He competed in tournaments, not for fame, but for the joy of the game. He played with grace and humility, just as his mother had taught him. Richard often sat in the audience, quietly watching, his heart swelling with pride each time the boy smiled in victory or bowed gracefully in defeat. He realized something profound. Success isn't about winning, it's about the lives you help rise. Years later, 10 years passed. The Whitmore mansion was quieter now. Richard had retired from most of his business, focusing instead on philanthropy and education. One morning, a letter arrived on his desk. It was from Elijah Whitmore, now 22, about to graduate from Harvard. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Whitmore, you once invited me to a game as a joke, but it changed my life. You didn't just teach me chess, you taught me grace. Because of your kindness, I can now help other kids like me see that their minds matter, no matter where they come from. Thank you for believing in me when the world didn't." Richard folded the letter with trembling hands. His eyes glistened as he whispered, "No, Elijah, thank you." He turned toward the chessboard on his desk, still the same one from that fateful day, and smiled. He placed one final piece on the board and said, quietly, "Checkmate, to pride." Thanks for watching Black Inside USA. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every story deserves to be heard.